Welcome back to the show, The Idiot. Today I shall be exploring one of my favorite writer's novels, that is The White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, before I begin, let me set aside and tell you that this is one of the books that is about love. The theme of the book is heartbreak, and what I took away the most from this novel is that life has small instances of happiness, and the rest of it is a mixture of pain and mundane regular activities. But it's precisely those instances of happiness that drives us and makes us continue ahead in life, even if it means never witnessing the source of your joy ever again. The novel is entirely in first person, and Dostoevsky never gives the narrator any name. With that being said, let's jump into the novel, and spoilers ahead. The novel begins with a guy who Dostoevsky describes as a dreamer. The book describes this man as a person in the corners of Petersburg. Quite a different life is lived. These people live in these corners in order to hide from the external outside world. Such people think that their lives are a pitiful one, and occasion the mournful hour may strike. When a day appears where they find something new, they would give all their years of fantasy and would give them not only for joy and for happiness, but without caring to make distinctions in that hour for sadness, remorse, and unchecked grief. They are artists of their own life. This is the narrator of the book. And the narrator is actually telling everything that I had told earlier, which was actually from the book directly, by the way, to this girl named Nastenka. Now, Nastenka finds this description that the narrator has given to her oddly very interesting and says the fact that she is only willing to pursue their acquaintance if he promises not to fall in love with her. The whole book goes ahead where we see Nastenka and the narrator going on these walks in across the streets of St. Petersburg. It reminded me of this book called Before Sunrise. And to your surprise, that movie was also just about love. I do plan on covering, the Before trilogy, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight, somewhere down the line. But, let's get back to topic now and let's focus on the book. That is, now we see Nastenka herself was tied down to St. Petersburg. Now, and it was all because of a blind grandmother who has no one else to look after her other than, Nastenka herself. Now, during that time when she was about 17 years of age, there was this person who had come as a, who had come to as a person to her to her lodgings into her house, because they needed more money. So because as they needed more money, they also as they needed more money, they decided that they can make their house a place where tenants can come in and live for for however long they wish, as long as they're willing to pay the rent. Now, this person was also a person that Nastenka actually falls in love with. That is her fiance. Now, this guy is a wonderful guy. I mean, he constantly asks how is the grandmother doing, how is she doing, and she invites them to operas, and he gives Nastenka beautiful novels to read by Pushkin, and honestly, her grandmother couldn't love this guy even more. She finds him to be a very very excellent sort of person. And Nastenka goes on to say the fact that that person that I have just told you of is basically her fiance. Now, that's exactly why, she cannot fall in love with, you know, the narrator. That's why she warns him that the narrator should not fall in love with her. Now, as that continues, the conversation goes on artlessly, where we hear both the narrator and Nastenka share their most intimate moments of their life with each other. And that whole story of how her grandmother and this guy and her fiance met each other and how they started to like each other. She even went to the lengths of even telling that to the narrator. This is something I believe. Now, there was only one problem though, that as this whole thing continued on. And the problem was that the narrator was falling in love with Nastenka. And as he was falling in love with her, he could not do much about it, And even despite being told he should not fall in love with her, right? It was these conversations that he was having with her, he was opening himself up to her. It was leading himself to be feeling almost vulnerable, and it is through this state of feeling vulnerable, but at the same time being accepted for who you are, that actually caused him to actually love her, you know but again, what I'm trying to say, and what I'm trying to really emphasize on why I consider this to be a problem, is because we often associate that because you have a certain bunch of ideals that you are supposed to adhere by in life, that also somehow, to work on these other things of the human psyche, in my opinion. You cannot really control who you fall or cannot fall in love with, despite being a very idealistic man. And even though he was somehow told that you should not fall in love with me, he still fell in love with her. And honestly, that is just truly depressing, right? And another good example of this is, you could be a very great rich aristocrat, and but at the same time you're a nobleman, but you fall in love with a really poor person, maybe a maidservant or just someone of a very lowly class, like the Romeo and Juliet. But even though it goes against the social norms and goes against the very sheer idea of logic, you still pursue towards it, and that's what I think. Love is a very strange and mysterious thing, and you must really empathize with such a feeling. You cannot really re-embrace with it with such brutality and logic, because I think human emotions and how we attribute our feelings onto things are beyond our control, like I have mentioned. Now, despite the struggles that the narrator is having because he has fallen in love with Nastenka, so does Nastenka have problems of her own. Now, you know how I mentioned to you that her grandmother genuinely likes this guy. Even she genuinely likes this guy, and that's why they are getting married. But the problem was that when Nastenka, confessed her love to her fiance, he basically said something around these lines. He says, "Look, I don't really have a very good position. I don't really have a good job as of now. But in 1 year from now, precisely 1 year, I'll be going out of St. Petersburg, going to Moscow, trying to find a good position and job. And once I get that job, I will be coming down immediately, meeting you, and at that point of time, we are going to marry immediately. But if you are to fall in love with anyone else, you are free to do so. But I can assure you that I would not do that." But right now, it has actually been an entire year. An entire year has passed. But even though an entire year has passed, the whole problem was the fact that this guy has not even written a single letter, not paid even a single visit to Nastenka or even her grandmother, despite knowing where they both live. And this really pains her, This is really causing her a lot of grief. So basically, what happens was Nastenka and the narrator, because they have been they have developed some form of friendship, decide to write a letter to, her fiance, telling the fact that it has been a year. I want to know what has happened to you. Now, this letter has been sent, but they don't receive anything. They don't receive any form of reciprocation. And to go on even further, it turns out that this guy, her fiance, actually is in town right now, and and the narrator actually knows where he's actually residing, and so the Stenka continues to write another letter, or maybe and even a third one. But all these letters are met with no response. And it was at this point of time that Nastenka says, "Man, to hell with this guy, man. He's such a pathetic man. What is wrong with him? I have been sending letters and he has not been replying to me even once." And she now feels as if that this person that whom she's going to marry might have already married someone else, and maybe as he has married someone else and is already having a good life, he does not want to associate his life with Nastenka, or even respond to her. That's probably why he is not responding. Now, the narrator, on the other hand, even though he has fallen in love with Nastenka, constantly tells her, no, Nastenka, this might not be real, this might not be true. Maybe he was just busy, and constantly reaffirms her to these notions that he is still there, and he might still be willing to help her, and still be willing to be there for him. And that's probably why he has come back to St. Petersburg. He's constantly making Nastenka think positively. But after a certain point, he has a breaking point, because, and the reason why he has a breaking point is because Nastenka constantly refers to him as a friend, as a brother, saying the fact that no one has ever talked to her so beautifully, so giving her such, giving her such positive reaffirmations that her fiance is going to come back. He's going to be very nice to her, and everything is going to work out just fine. She feels that he has probably been the best of man, and there is no other man that could ever be better than him. But it's all through these words that she is telling to the narrator, and describing him as, that the narrator says, I have to tell this to you. I actually love you. And in those moments, Nastenka actually remains quiet for a while, and she says, you know what? This person that I'm about to marry, I don't think he's ever going to come anytime soon. And I think you're a great guy, so I can convince my grandmother of the same, and I think she can see the same of you. So why not? Let's get married and let's spend our whole lives with each other. Now, while they were walking, both of them, gleefully in the streets of Petersburg, and as they're continuing their walk, it somehow leads to them going towards Nastenka's house. Now, while they were near Nastenka's house, Nastenka's fiance comes, and he appears, and Nastenka lounges towards him. And now, while Nastenka lounges towards him, there was one thing that happens, and that one thing that happens was that the narrator was just standing by, listening, and the fiance says, I have secured a good job. I have got a good position, and now that I've secured a good job and a good position, I'm more than willing to marry you. And now the narrator, he was hearing all of this, and then what happens is the fact that Nastenka says, I'm willing to marry you too. And now the narrator just walks away silently, going back to his old life as it was before. Now, he does receive a letter from Nastenka later on in the novel. Now, when he does receive that letter, he says the fact that, now he does receive a letter from Nastenka, like I have mentioned before, and he says the fact that he does not feel any grief, when he gets that letter. That letter asks him to join for his family. That letter asks him to meet his fiance and come to their wedding. But he says something around these lines. He says that, but to imagine that I should bear you a grudge, Nastenka, that I should cast a dark cloud over your serene, untroubled happiness, that by my bitter reproaches I should cause distress to your heart, should poison it with secret remorse, and should force it to throb with anguish at the moment of bliss, that I should crush a single one of those tender blossoms which you have twined in your dark tresses when you go with him to the altar. Oh, never, never. May your sky be clear, may your sweet smile be bright and untroubled, and may you be blessed for that moment of blissful happiness which you gave to another lonely and grateful heart. My God, a whole moment of happiness, is that too little for the whole of man's life? And whether or not, this guy, that is the narrator, actually goes on to Nastenka's wedding is never known. But what I have just mentioned to you earlier was basically how the book ends. And this was something that really, really, it woke something within me. It made me realize that love is a very selfless thing, and it's not something that is really saying the fact that if someone is there for you in permanence, it's only then you're happy. It's maybe because that they are there even momentarily, you can be happy. And I would like to draw an analogy here. that my parents always used to, my parents and maybe many other parents I've also seen often say the fact that we should not be in indulge in any relationships while we are in school or we are in college, as it may possibly ruin our life, and so much of our life could be wasted because of it, or we may end up in a far worse state in after the relationship is over, uh, and we cause that all that our pain and anguish because of that relationship. I consider all of that to be completely false, and the real reason why I think of that to be the case is because while you are in a relationship with that person, the amount of time you have spent with her, the amount of happiness that you've had with her, your mind almost is spinning. You cannot control it. It goes beyond imagination. You're having so much fun. And even if it means that, and even if you end things up, you break up with her, and something happens down the line, when things go bad in life, you will look back at those moments and remember those moments, those times where you had so much fun, and that will be the reason and the drive to keep you going ahead in life. It'll keep pushing you forward. And that's why falling in love is never a bad thing. And it's never too late. And it's never, and definitely never too early. And whether you're an old man or a young man, you should fall in love. It's a very important thing. And that's what I have realized in this novel. And, yeah, there are very few things that might really be, of any value to us, but it's those few things that are of value to us, and even it's their impermanence in nature that makes life worth living. Thank you for listening, thank you for the show, and catch you on next time. Peace.